before we begin, anyone here who's a member of Dr. Melody Tobey's class, if you haven't signed in, please go outside and sign in. It's important that you do that. We're going to start in 1 second. We're just trying to get the technicians queued up, and then we'll begin. I guess while we're waiting to start up, I might as well do a little bit of housekeeping here. Everybody should have received this flyer outside, and this flyer pertains to our upcoming African History Month events. This year, we're going to be revisiting the whole issue of African people in the criminal justice system. And as you can see, we're going to have a stellar panel. Some of these people you may know, some of them you may not know, but all of them have been on TV, and you've seen them on a variety of programs. We're going to have a former police sergeant or lieutenant, I don't remember which was his final rank, Brother DeLacy Davis, who's a member of BCAP, Black Cops Against Police Brutality. He will be here on the 14th. We're going to have former FBI agent Tyrone Powers, who will be here on the 15th. And on the 16th of February, we're going to have someone I grew up with, Reverend Marsha Lee Watson, who was the former president of the New York State Correction Officers Association, and she'll be here to speak on imprisonment and what goes on inside of the prisons. You'll also notice on the flyer, also on the 16th, right here in the Little Theater, we're going to have our annual Jackie McLean African Heritage Jazz Concert featuring Renee McLean. And this is going to be an important event. We do this every year. And I might even decide to pull out my trumpet and play along with them. It's been a long time because I grew up in the house of Jackie McLean, and Renee and I grew up together. But it's been a long time. I know the brain says I can do it, but the lips say I can't. So we'll see what happens. Nonetheless, the reason I'm going to mention this also, we hope that you will show up. It's going to be at 3:30 on that Thursday. But it's going to be also open mic. So anyone here who has any positive poetry that they want to do, any rap, anything that's positive, you're going to be able to do it to live music. The last time we had this event, it was a stellar event. And if you run into any of the poets or rappers, they'll tell you they had a good time. So if you have anything that you want to do, all you have to do is come by my office. We just want to hear what it is to make sure you don't use any choice words that would be anti what we feel is appropriate for this occasion. And just audition, just let us hear what it is. You don't have to perform. We just want to hear what the words are. And I think it would be a great experience for you. It will be recorded. And finally, on the flyer, April 29th, we have I think this is the 31st year, somewhere in there, the annual African Heritage Graduation, our 31st year. And this year, our guest speaker will be the great poet. She's a legacy in this nation. You know, she's like Maya Angelou and everybody else. Professor Sonia Sanchez, who was my professor at Temple University, she will be here. And we're going to do a special tribute this year at the graduation for our honored ancestors, people who have departed years ago, that we honor for their contribution to the African experience. And this year, we're going to be doing a special honoring and special tribute to Celia Cruz. And she represents the African Latino experience. So I suggest that if you're graduating, please sign up for it. But if you just want to come and participate, you are welcome. First, let me introduce myself and greet you. My name is Dr. James Conyers, Director of Africana Studies here at King University. And as always, it's my pleasure to welcome you to our annual celebration of the birth of Dr. Martin Luther King. So happy that you come out, so happy that you're willing to partake in some information with us in terms of the life and contribution of Dr. King. As far as my life is concerned, there have been two seminal figures that, again, I grew up under during this period of time. And of course, that was Dr. Martin Luther King. But for me personally, it was El Hajj Malik Shabazz. You know him as Malcolm X. It was one of the great influences in my life, along with another person, Dr. John Henry Clark. Today, we are blessed to have a former member of the King community come back to speak to us about the contributions and life of Dr. Martin Luther King. We have Reverend Manuel K. Donelson is going to be our guest speaker, but before we bring him up, I'm going to read a little bit of his extensive bio. I've tried to work this thing and narrow it down and, selectively cut and paste and do a whole lot of different things with it. So I'm going to, hopefully he'll approve of what I'm going to do based upon what he's given us, and then we'll get right into the lecture. Reverend Manuel K. Donelson is recognized as a man with vision and purpose to reach people and change lives. Born in Aurora, Illinois, and raised in a single-parent household, he lived with his mother and 6 siblings. At the age of 17, Manuel made a life-changing decision and enlisted in the United States military. While in the United States Army, he courageously served his country in Operation Desert Storm. During the course of his military experience, he learned self-discipline, insistence, and leadership. In addition, he received the Southwest Asia Service Medal and 2 Bronze Stars during the Operation Desert Storm for his heroic and meritorious achievements and service in Iraq. Reverend Donelson, also known as the Rev, is a former associate pastor and youth pastor from 2003 to 2013 of Morning Star Community Christian Center in Linden, New Jersey. Reverend Donelson credits King University for preparing and giving him the tools needed to successfully create and manage nonprofit organizations. Reverend Donelson has a bachelor's degree and master's degree in public administration from King University and was employed as the university's associate director in the Office of Undergraduate Admissions. Without further ado, Reverend Donelson.
Good afternoon, everybody. How you doing? Good to see the familiar faces here. There's a quote that I want to start with. It says, "History will have to record that the greatest tragedy of this period of social transition was not the strident clamor of the bad people, but the appalling silence of the good people." And that was from the late Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King, Jr. We're going to start with a video, and through this discussion, we're going to talk about a letter, but also what do we do with the information. The video marks a place in history. We're here to celebrate and talk about the life of Dr. King and his wife, Coretta Scott King. So the video goes back in a time in history where, some of the video or the pics may be a little uncomfortable. It's appropriate, but it may be uncomfortable because it takes us back to, a time of segregation and separation. So it's a quick video that we'll play. But before I do that, I just want to say thank you to Brother James, Dr. Conyers, for the invite, to Lisa Akins, and just the whole Office of Africana Studies, and just the work that they do tirelessly here on campus, courageously, and sometimes not always appreciated as it should be. So thank you very much. And thank you guys for coming out. I know some, because I have taught at King. I'll be teaching again this summer. So I know some have to come because of class. And some came because they may know me, and others just was walking by. I just want you to know you'll leave with some good information. You'll leave with some positive information. And we won't hold you long. The video, I think, is about less than 9 minutes or so, and then I'll do the presentation, and then we'll have you out of here. All right? We good? Okay, thanks.
And I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
To Alabama Governor George Wallace, the continuation of segregation was a solemn promise. To Martin Luther King, it was a scourge he vowed to overcome. In the city of Birmingham, the Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth, whose church and home had been bombed because of his activism, began a campaign to integrate the downtown shopping district. King joined him in March of 1963. They both expected an extreme response from Public Safety Commissioner, segregationist Eugene Bull Connor.
One of the good fortunes of the civil rights movements were its enemies. Where could you find a better enemy than Bull Connor of Birmingham?
King submitted to arrest on April 12th, Good Friday, to draw maximum press coverage. Attorney General Robert Kennedy had asked King to avoid confrontations with police, wanting to pursue civil rights gains through the courts, not the streets.
Dr. King said, Mr. Attorney General, I can best serve this country and my people by focusing on the evils of segregation. He said it's a corruption of the society. It's a corruption of the soul.
Sitting in his jail cell in Birmingham, King wrote about that corruption. He responded to an open letter that appeared in the Birmingham News that same day. It was titled A Call for Unity and was signed by 8 white clergymen. Their appeal made reference to outside leadership, calling the protests unwise and untimely. King wrote in the margins of that newspaper, "I am in Birmingham because injustice is here." He went on, "Birmingham is probably the most thoroughly segregated city in the United States. Its ugly record of brutality is widely known." The sentiments King expressed in the letter had already made an impact on students who had committed themselves to civil rights activism throughout the Deep South.
We were greatly influenced by Martin Luther King Jr. and the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence. But we didn't like the tempo of change. We wanted to speed it up.
It's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer.
On May 3rd, students re-energized the campaign. Some were in high school, others were even younger. The Birmingham campaign became known as the Children's Crusade.
It was easy for a black student like myself in the South to say, well, if they can do it in Little Rock, they can do it in Montgomery. If they can stand up, we can stand up too.
Connor and the police represented.
When Bull Connor ordered the police to disperse the protesters with dogs, it was clear this was a real battle, a violent confrontation. Firemen were ordered to use the full force of their hoses on the demonstrators. The local newspapers supported Bull Connor's response, blaming the chaos on the demonstrators.
I really believe he thought somehow in some way that he would scare us. But he didn't understand the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence. He didn't understand the spirit of the movement.
Television and newspaper reports captured the brutality in Birmingham and showed it to the whole nation. Outside the region, it was shocking. It was horrifying. It was unacceptable.
It brought the civil rights movement into people's homes, with many American families watching the 6 o'clock news in such a way that it simply just couldn't be ignored.
In just a week, the demonstrators' nonviolent response created a public outcry that Birmingham could not dismiss. On May 10th, symbols of segregation, like separate water fountains, became relics as city leaders signed the Birmingham Truce. In addition, a plan was agreed upon to desegregate lunch counters. This was the kind of meaningful negotiation Martin Luther King had called for in his letter. We know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. Frankly, I have yet to engage in a direct action campaign that was well-timed in the view of those who have not suffered unduly from the disease of segregation. For years now, I've heard the word wait. It rings in the ear of every Negro with piercing familiarity. This wait has almost always meant never. We must come to see with one of our distinguished jurists that justice too long delayed is justice denied. These words had inspired citizens young and old to take direct action in the streets of Birmingham. The letter was soon published in newspapers and magazines, and its power was undeniable. King had gone to Birmingham to fight injustice. In the end, his most powerful weapon was the letter he wrote from the confines of a jail cell.
So we can see here that history has a record. I just want you to know that the letter from the Birmingham jail was a response to something that was going on. A lot of people don't understand that at that time there was. I wanted the video to do most of the talking about the letter. I didn't want to dissect the letter piece by piece, but I want to talk about the response that we should have today, and what type of response should we have to any injustices we see, and also that call to action. I believe that this particular call to action from Dr. King at that time was a couple of things. One, it was a response to reality that was going on. The reality was that there was injustice, there was segregation, there were people that were not being treated equally, and it was comfortable for others to say, well, let the courts deal with it. Let's not break the norm. Let's not cause some type of rift or some type of response that will cause us to activate ourselves. I listen to Sirius XM radio. I listen to it for sports. I listen to it for politics, news. But one of the programs I like is a gentleman by the name of Joe Madison. Joe Madison has a show he calls the Black Eagle. And all throughout the day, I listen to different newscasters talk. But what I like about Joe, he starts at 6 in the morning. After they call, he'll have the people call in, and they'll be talking to Joe about the politics of today and what's going on. And he always ends with the same response most of the time. What are you going to do about it? He said, you're just going to call into me complaining? What are you going to do about the situation? And a lot of times that's the question that we need to be asking ourselves. What are we going to do about, our own personal journey, our own lives, and any injustices that we experience or we see, whether it's on a college campus or whether we see it in America today? And the only way you can do that is you have to, first of all, know what's going on. One of the things that Joe also introduces to his audience is if you don't do something locally or on your campus, then you can't really have an impact nationally. You can ask yourself a couple of questions today. One of the questions I ask a lot of students in my class, I say to them, there's a word and a term that's used almost every day in the news, and it's called GOP. And so I asked them, what does GOP stand for? Every single day they say it in the news. Every day it's in every newspaper. But what does GOP stand for? Then I asked the other question. All right, raise your hand or blink if you know what GOP stands for. Good. And raise your hand if you don't. Good. And the reason why I did that is not for the purpose of to single people out. It's the purpose of to deal with our reality sometimes. And sometimes part of the reality is that in order for me to impact change, in order for me to be a part of change, in order for me to be a part of a difference, I have to be involved. I have to know what's going on. How many of us here today can honestly say we know who our congressman is? How many can say do we know who our mayor is, right? How many know what ward or what district you live in right now? Who's your council person, right? Raise your hand if you've been to a local town, your town's council meeting in the last 6 months. Yeah. How many of us have never been? Raise your hand if you've never been, right? So the point is, once again, we have to be involved, but first thing we do is have to know. We have to know what's going on. Because if we're not paying attention, we don't know what's going on, then we can easily be deceived by the subliminal messages, by the sound bites, by the quick news that we see going on today. All right? In this letter and in some of his statements, King had said also, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. And when he made this statement, he was talking about a couple of things I want you to write down if you are taking notes. One, how far way too long people of all colors kept silent to the injustice being done. Because he knew that some of them were good people, right? And good people meaning they came from good homes. They were not practicing any type of segregation, separation, or division, but they had the ability and the power with their voice to say something. Anytime you have the opportunity to speak up when you see something that's going wrong, that's always the right thing to do. It's always the right thing to do. 2, he knew that most people were scared, right? Back in that day, can you imagine where your life could be online just because you said something or you showed up for a particular event? People were scared if they spoke up, and he wanted to do something about that. The 3, most of the authority figures in the South were corrupt. So you even had the law, right, that was against the people. You even had physical harm was even being threatened to people. Fights against things were even being done. The 4th thing, Dr. King was trying to get more people involved. He was trying to get them involved. It wasn't necessarily that he wanted to go to jail. He was making a statement by saying that, you know what, the only way for this to be on full display is, 1, I'm going to have to be uncomfortable personally. I'm going to have to put myself in a position, this is Dr. King, where I'm going to have to do something about it as well. And he knew he was trying to get more people involved in the movement. He knew that if he was as society kept silent and did absolutely nothing about the unfair treatment of people, then it was part of his soul, right, that would also be dying slowly. Dr. King was trying to, and you know, keep in mind, some of the people were paralyzed. Fear has this way of sometimes making us not even move. And if you ever been, I can't imagine, I can sympathize, but I can't even imagine, right, growing up at a time where I had to decide, you know, where to sit on a bus. I had to decide which water fountain to drink at. Or if I'm walking down the street, I couldn't look somebody in the eye without some type of repercussion. But these were the things that were going on, and these were the things that were causing disruption at that time. So he was responding to the reality, and then what he wanted to do with the letter, he was defending the design that they had created. Their design was nonviolent movements, right? This was their strategy, if you will. We're going to go out there because it was easy, because remember at that time, especially when it became to the March on Washington, there were others who thought, you know, that this is not the way. There were others who had that eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth mentality. There were others who thought, well, let's pick up arms too. Some people saw that as a position of weakness. It's a position of weakness just to march and sit and allow people to treat us any type of way. But King knew that the best way to fight off any type of violence or war is with peace. That's the best way. You can see today, even in this country and other places, how violence does not solve the problem. You may can defeat a people, you may can bring them down, you may can chase them out, but that doesn't mean it's going to go away. So he knew that the only way to make a difference is to do something. Yes, it was scary. Yes, some people's lives were in danger, and yes, some people even died. But they did something. They had to do something. If you look over the years and you look at some of the civil rights books that have been written, you see those who've given up their lives just for you and I even to have the right to vote. And now today, some of us don't even exercise their right. These people paved the way for the liberties that we can now appreciate. We can appreciate Dr. King's life. And some people may not know Dr. King lived a short life. A short life, 30-something years, a young person, a very short life. And imagine in those 30-plus years that he was on the earth, what he accomplished just by having a voice, just by using what he had. And you got to ask yourself the central question. He was confined, but he was not convicted. Being confined means you're restricted in an area, right? You're cramped, it's narrow, but it's keeping you small, right? When somebody's trying to suppress you, they try to keep you small. They try to, keep you little, if you will, compact, tight. And the reason why they do that is so you're uncomfortable. They knew in this particular situation that if he's locked up, see, what confinement does, it's a form of imprisonment. It isolates you, right? So they know the first thing we do is to take you from human contact, and we need that to survive. So they knew that infrequent phone calls, right, rare contact with family and visits, restricted reading material. They finally gave him a newspaper. He was confined 22 to 24 hours. It had an impact on you mentally, physically, and also they know a divided house can't stand. So without the confinement, what they were trying to do is to separate him from people to hopefully convince him not to do what he's doing. But he was determined. Now keep in mind that the churches are the original letter, the response he was responding to. It was the church, it was the ministers that had an issue with what King and his people were doing. So it tells us a couple of things. Ministry and churches can be destroyed when there's no unity. As I said before, even when the scripture says, and if a house is divided against itself, that house cannot stand, right? Rarely does opposition, just so you know, come from the outside source. Usually it's somewhere from within. That's why it's not surprising that even the ministers who should have stood side by side with him, right, were the ones who had the issue with him. Once the unity of the church or the unity of any organization begins to crumble, then it begins to be weakened, it begins to be paralyzed, and it's ineffective. And imagine if you allow your own mind to be confined, all right, and to be convicted for something you didn't do, then that's the first result, that's the first time that you begin to become ineffective. Dr. King realized that he was one person. He was like a match. If you take a match, he was just one match, right? That could bring a level of unrest and uncomfortable that the clergy did not want to see. If we take a match right now, just one match, all right, and we were to strike the match on the wood and light it, and we lay it on the carpet and we walk away, it could bring this whole place down. That's one match. So it reminds us that our lives, that one person, you can make a difference wherever you are. Now let's fast forward it to today. In Birmingham between 1957 and 1962, keep in mind there were 17 black churches and homes that had been bombed. So including, as you saw, Shuttleworth's home. 40% of African Americans there had little hope for political solution. There was a racial divide. There were only 80,000 registered voters. Only 10,000 were people of color. So this was a time, as early as 1962, the ministers in SLC, Fred Shuttleworth, had suggested this rally. They wanted to do something about it. They looked at the condition and the situation. They said, what are we going to do? So we fast forward to today. What injustices do we see today? We see poverty today. We see homelessness. Just the other day, there was a count. I was sharing this with some people at a Bible study. 2 days ago, there was a count to go count the homeless in Elizabeth from a team that I work with. And I wasn't part of it because I wasn't assigned to it, but those who were assigned had to go out at 2 in the morning. And they had to go out at 2 in the morning and do a count just to see how many people are homeless. And to give back those numbers so the city could record the numbers, and also they can come up with solutions and try to see how large their homeless population is. So the question is, these are some of when we see poverty, right? When we see immigration laws going out of control, when we see injustices on the job, in the classroom, in our lives, what are we going to do about it? Homelessness is an issue that is facing America and facing all over, that some of us, we don't have a voice. We don't want to talk about it, nor do we want to do anything about it. And we know in everything there's good people and there's people who are not so good. There's some people who, just like with homelessness, we see a homeless person, ask yourself, how many times, when somebody asks me for something, do I get offended, right? How many times do I see it as like you're interrupting my day? You're disrupting what I'm trying to do. I want to tell you, standing up for human rights, standing up for justice, or just helping somebody is never convenient. It's never convenient. The reason why, it's inconvenient. We're in the drive-thru, and somebody's sitting there asking for change. And in your mind, you're thinking, I'm about to get a burger, I'm about to get a fry, or I'm about to get some coffee, and you're standing here asking me for change. The bigger question is, do you have it, right? Do you have it? I always tell people that's an easy thing to do. I keep spare change and a couple of dollars in my car. It's very easy, right? How many times during the week does that happen? I think probably what comes out of my car, if between 50 cents and $1 a week. That's how many times it happens. Sometimes, and I always respond to what they ask for. Now, luckily, they haven't asked for $100, right? But I always respond with that. If they say, can I get some change? Here you go, right? They say, can I have $1? Oh, here you go. I'm already prepared for it. And why do I do that? Because I feel like I'm already blessed what I have, right? All right. I also feel like this. I believe in sowing good seeds, right? I believe in I believe in planting good seeds. And anytime you plant something, you're expecting a harvest, right? So it's easy for me when I see a homeless person, I don't get stirred up. When I see somebody, you'll be in a line of cars waiting at the red light. You ever see somebody walking down? And think about how you respond, right? Look in your mind and think, am I that person that see them coming down, like, oh my God, I hope this light changes. Come on, come on, come on. As soon as it changes, right, you can't move, but if that car moves, that person could be right there. What do? We hit the gas, right? All for 25, maybe 50 cents. And all we have to do, actually slow down, disrupt traffic a little bit, and say, roll down the window, here you go, here's 50 cents. Because imagine if it was you. This is why this letter was so important. All right? Imagine that those who are in a position to do something don't do something. Each and every one of us can do something in our own world. We're studying at my church the book of Nehemiah, and Nehemiah is a biblical scripture. He was a leader. But he looked at the conditions of his people that he had left in Jerusalem. It said the gates are burned and the walls are down. And Nehemiah went to the king and asked for letters to go do something about the situation. He knew by making that decision that, guess what? This is not going to be a popular decision, one. And two, he knew that he wasn't going to be liked. And he knew it wasn't going to be easy. But he wanted to do something about it. So ask yourself, where in your life do you need to get active, where you need to get busy? In his concession speech, we had the President Obama on Tuesday, January 10th, right? He's the 44th President of the United States. In his final White House speech, the former President of the United States declared, he said that he hasn't abandoned his vision of progressive change, but warning that it now comes with a new set of priorities. His voice at moments catching with emotion, he recounted some setbacks and some successes. He realized as president, I had a good plan. There's some things I wanted to accomplish, but over the 8 years, there were some setbacks and there were some successes. You ask yourself over the last couple of years of your life, if you're a freshman here, right, or if you're out of school, have you experienced some setbacks? Have you experienced some successes in your life? Admittedly and candidly, he talked about renewing his efforts of reconciliation. So the first step for getting involved and doing something about it for us, the first step is always, it takes a commitment. It's recommitting ourselves to being a part of the change. It takes commitment. Just like a relationship, right? There's nothing worse than being in a relationship with somebody who's not committed. Has anybody ever been there where you were in a relationship with a person that just you knew they were not committed to the process, right? You're doing everything that you could do, everything you wanted to do, whether it was, and think about it, especially if you're in a relationship, with somebody that you love, right? All right. Think about if you were in a relationship with a person that just never called you back. How would you feel? You called morning, noon, or night, whatever. How you doing? How's it going, honey? Whatever. They never called you back, right? Or when they did call you back, it was always late, or it was always right before you went to bed, right? Think about it. You said, let's go do something. Let's go out. Let's go A. Let's go to B. And every time you go out, you show up, that person is not there, all right? There was no commitment. Think about if you're talking about your goals and your plans, your ability to move forward, and they were not committed. It takes a renewed commitment. If we don't commit to the process of changing our own lives and changing others' lives, it's not going to happen. That's what college is all about. College is a commitment. There's a whole lot of people who are great starters, but they're horrible finishers. You'll see in your tenure through school, you'll see a lot of people come through, right? You'll see people in classes that you know are not committed to the process. You ever see that? The ones that come right in there and put their head down and go to sleep, right? They never buy the text, right? And they'll just go through the process the whole semester. And typically if you talk to them because somebody else is paying for it, or they got a loan, or they just don't care, all right? They're not committed to the process. So it's not surprising that they're on the 6-year plan, the 7-year plan, or the never made it plan, right? And same with a relationship. Relationships fail because of a lot of reasons, but mostly because there has to be a commitment to see this thing through the end. So the president was reminding us that we have to commit ourselves to the process. He demanded that Americans renew their efforts for reconciliation, and he said it falls to each of us to be those anxious, jealous guardians of our democracy. The president said to embrace the joyous task we've been given to continually try to improve the great nation of ours. If we want to see change, especially in 2017 in our own lives, all right, we got to ask ourselves, what am I doing about the change? It's easy to turn on the TV and now complain about the 45th president, right? And we see that unrest going everywhere, right? And some of us ask ourselves, am I just complaining about things or I'm doing something about it, right? Or am I just following sound bites? Am I waiting for CNN to give me the full story, right? Or I'm going to get involved. And the first place is locally. Change starts within, right? Change starts within. It starts with us first. What are some things you're trying to change, all right? Our founders quarreled and compromised, and they expected us to do the same. They expected us to get involved, and that's why they set up the Constitution. That's why we had the Civil Rights Act. That's why we had marches on Washington. That's why we've seen things happen, because people decided to do something about it. But they knew that democracy does not require a sense of solidarity. The ideal is that for all of us, even with our outward differences, that we try to come together and work together. Now, the last thing I'll give you before I go is what I try to give to people everywhere I go. Everywhere I go, I try to remind people that, you know, because sometimes we devalue our life. We devalue our presence. We devalue what we bring to the table. And I want to tell you that that's just simply not true, all right? The enemy of your soul is always trying to distract you from what you're supposed to do. That's the first thing. There's always a distraction taking place, all right? You ever driving down somewhere, or you ever headed somewhere, right? And you hear something or somebody throws a rock, or you hear a sound and you look the other way, all right? That's how the enemy works sometimes. All right. I want to remind us to be laser focused on what we're trying to do. All right. If you're trying to see change in your life, you have to be laser focused. Laser focus means if I was to take a laser light and I point it at the wall, you would see exactly where that light was at. If I move it to the left, I move it to the right, you can follow it. That's how you have to be when it comes to your own personal change and your own personal goals and what you're working on. Laser focus. The devalue. Devalue means I'm not good enough. I don't have the right tools. I don't have the right education. I don't come from the right family, right? That's what the enemy tries to do, is devalue us. And I want you to know, just like that match, we all can make a difference. We all can bring something to the table, all right? Then we have to remember that we have to have convictions too. Part of our convictions is to know that, you know, what am I willing to give? What am I willing to give, and what do people get when they bring me to the table? When somebody brings us to the table, they should know that here lies a person who's going to do what they said they're going to do. You look at your track record. Ask yourself over the last year, every time somebody called upon me, did I do what I said I was going to do? Imagine if Dr. King he didn't have convictions. Imagine if he wasn't committed. We wouldn't be talking about him today. The only way you can have a legacy for your life is you have to live one. If somebody's going to be talking about you later in life, it's because of something you did while you were here on earth. All right? And you'll see a lot of people go through life. All right? You'll see a lot of people go through life, and you'll see them never, ever pursue the things that they could have done and should have done. And a lot of it is because of what some of those people did back then. They were afraid. There was fear. We have to deal with our internal fears first, and then we have to deal with our outside influences and fears as well. I tell my congregation to always have a moment of silence. And part of that moment of silence is for this. It's for all the dreams and all the goals that are never accomplished. All right? Because they're dead. Because we dare not to challenge ourselves to go beyond our comfort zone. All right? What I like about the black eagle, as I said, Joe Madison, it reminds me of an eagle, period. Eagles always run to the storm. And ask yourself, am I moving forward or am I going backwards? Right? If you want to see change and progress in life, you got to be moving forward. And recognize that there's a storm every once in a while, because seasons do change, right? In life, we won't always see roses, but it's how we go to the storm. Eagles also, they are particular about who they mate with. Eagles just don't mate with anybody. So when it comes to relationships and it comes to people that you allow in your circle, you got to be particular about that. All right? Everybody who says, I like you, I love you, don't have your best interests at heart. There's nothing wrong with giving people time to get to know you. There's nothing wrong with you giving yourself time to get to know them. All right? They're particular about eagles who they mate with. And eagles eat off fresh food. All right? And fresh food just represents new, updated, relevant information. And sometimes we're going to have to turn off the TV. We live in a generation where we have a lot of reality TV, right? We have survival type shows, right? We have cooking shows. We have love and hip hop. We have the housewives shows, right? All right? A lot of these things are meant to be just entertainment. But for some of us, they become real life, all right? And America's so caught up in reality TV, right, that we've elected even a president from reality TV, basically. Because why? It wasn't because of his policies. It's neither here nor there where I stand about the president. But it wasn't because of his policies, because he never really talked about it, all right? It was because of sound bites and his fame, right? We like our entertainment, but that's his reality. Today, Donald Trump stands as the president of the United States. What about you? What are you going to do? People would ask me, friends of mine, what are you going to do on the inauguration? You're going to watch it? You're going to do this? I told them it had no bearing on my life. The inauguration, whether I watch it or not, it wasn't going to pay the light bill, right? Whether I watch it or not, it wasn't going to pay the mortgage, right? Whether I watch it or not, it wasn't going to work for me, right? I still have to get up and go to work. I still have to do what I have to do. The question is, what am I going to do with what I have, right? And here's the example. I'll close out with this. One of the things I talk about is I like to bake every once in a while or cook, right? And one of my favorite dishes is, anybody ever had baked macaroni and cheese? Anybody ever had that? Somebody was like, oh, yeah. I use about 7 cheeses on mine. I could do more, actually, right? I could do more. And homemade chocolate chip cookies. I like to make those, right? Anybody like chocolate chip cookies? I should have brought a few today, right? That have made the presentation. They'd be like, oh, yeah, that presentation was great, But I can tell you right now, for me to make either one of those things, one, I have to have all the right ingredients, right, for me. Now, I could just throw together any old thing and just be like, oh, here you go. If you were to taste it, you'd be like, that was good. That's not the response I'm looking for, right? And anything I cook, I try it before I give it to somebody. I really do. Because one, I rarely do it. It's not like I do it every day, especially the macaroni and cheese I make because it's expensive, right? Right? And so are the cookies. And I'll get to this story, but I'm going to digress a bit. One time, a church, long time ago, I was young, a church had asked me to donate, for their bake sale. And I was like, oh, this is good. And I did my homemade chocolate chip cookies. And I made like a couple of dozen. They're homemade, though. So we talking about real butter, right? Brown sugar, vanilla extract, all, flavoring, and there's some couple other things I won't give you because you'll be trying to go home and stir it up, right? White sugar, right? So I got there, they had the cookies, and it's been some years, so my numbers may be a little bit off, but when I got to the bake sale myself, the cookies were at the table, and they had them like 5 for 50 cents in a bag. I was like, I said, what are you doing? I mean, they were nice size, and and it was like, we just wanted to give them a fair price. We're trying. I said, no. I said, the at least 2, probably 2 for, and I gave her a different price. But I told her, I said, the money that I spent just, for the ingredients and cooking this, I could have gave that to you, and it would have made triple what you're gonna make today. So I learned a valuable lesson. So now I go back. But when I make those cookies, or I make the macaroni and cheese, some things that are important is timing, right? Timing is real important. And for me, I have to have a set time for both. Because even with the cookies, if I cook them too long, right, they'll be harder than what I want. And I like them soft, I like them chewy. So time is important. All the right ingredients. If any one of those ingredients are missing, it's going to throw off the end result. The other thing is the time to prepare, preparation. A lot of times we're trying to accomplish things in our life, we're trying to do great things, but you need time to prepare for what you're going to do. If you're in college today, this is the time you are given to prepare for what you're going to do later. So you have to take it serious, right? So if I was to if somebody gave me 30 seconds when I had all the right ingredients, I had the oven, I had the cookie sheet, and they told me, now make your cookies, they're not going to come out right. Because 30 seconds, I need time to prepare, right? Even if I had everything. So sometimes you'll have everything together, but timing is still important. So look at the time you have and look at where you're headed, okay? So along the way, right, whatever we're trying to accomplish, along the way, you want to make sure that, one, I use my time wisely. Time is a precious gift from up above. It really is. And if we treated time as invaluable, as important as Dr. King did, think about it. You're sitting in jail. How many of us, right, over like an 8-day period or so would write a letter in the margins of a newspaper? If you read the letter, I got a copy of it right here, that you can print out, because the family estate owns all the rights to everything. But if you read the letter, even the words, all right, some of the things that he was quoting, you imagine, how did this come out of his mind in jail? Just to do that, I would need a thesaurus, I would need a dictionary, an encyclopedia. But you know what? It reminded me he was committed to the process. That's why he knew all that stuff. And I take it on something small. It's like with my cookies or with youth development. I work with youth. When I'm called to do something with young people, it's like second nature because I've been doing it my whole career. I can go to a program and they'll have a youth that's disruptive or out of control. In seconds, I can get that person to focus and we redirect them in seconds because I've been doing it my whole life. I've been studying the research. I've been looking at results. And also I've been active in it. Over the last 6 years, I've been running a program that I have been present for every Friday and Saturday night. Every Friday and Saturday night for 3 hours on Friday, 10 o'clock at night till 1 in the morning. It's called the Masterpiece Program. I've been running for over 6 years. And probably out of 52 weeks, I've been there at least 48 weeks a year, right? And I could have easily had somebody else do it, but I wanted to make sure that I was involved in the process and be present so I can understand the issues. So when I'm called to help or I'm called to speak on the issues, I don't come unprepared, I don't come undetermined, and I don't come unqualified. So that's what this is right now. We look at his life and we ask ourselves, this is what I can learn. I can learn a great deal, one, from this letter. And some of the things I want you to remember is to get involved. And like I said, it starts with you. Dr. King graduated college, I believe, at 19 years old, right? This child prodigy was just, he was a phenomenon, really. But he didn't just stop there, right? He continued on. Imagine he could enjoy the comforts of his his home, his family, his wife and kids. It takes a great person to leave their home knowing every day that you may not come back. And he talked about it frequently. And imagine, are we that committed? Are we that committed to what we want to do? At this time, we're going to close out and remind you of one last quote again. And I put it at the end to remind us: our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. And as I said before, those things are even important to you. Don't be silent about things that you see that you need to speak on. We're scattered at different places on the world. I'm glad when I see people who do climate change, right? They speak on those issues, because that's not my issue. I'm passionate about it, but I'm not a student of it. So I celebrate those people who do it. I celebrate people who work with seniors. I had a chance to visit a senior home not too long ago, and I was in awe, because I work with youth and young adults. I was in awe of how the people that work with them, the care, the concern, the finesse they had, right? You look at people who, animal rights people, all right? You wanna know where your area of concern is, where your area of expertise is, but it starts here first, right? It starts here. All right, that's why when you're on a plane, they tell you to, for your survival, get your oxygen first. When they give you those instructions, put the mask on you first, then put it on somebody else, because you cannot help anybody if you don't help yourself. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Reverend Donelson. We're going to open it. I know in the interest of time, and I know people have to leave, and if you do have to leave, please try to do it as quietly as possible. But what we want to do right now is open it up to questions. So if you have any questions, please direct those questions to Reverend Donelson, and he will do his best to field those questions right now.
Any questions? And thank you to those who left their offices. Old friends, I see you out there. Thank you for coming out. Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. There were, yes, to answer your question, yes, there were ministers, people of power, even entertainers who were against Dr. King. This particular response was to an article and a letter that had went out, and they really wanted Dr. King to use a different method, and so he was responding to those who authored that particular article. And when he read it, that's what he was responding to. But the backdrop of that, there were just as many people and even like rallies who were against Dr. King coming into their city, you know, because they didn't want him to cause unrest in the city. And yeah, and people, some people were, you know, against his methods too. All right. So yes. Any other questions? Yes. Mm-hmm. Well, I would say start whatever's convenient. Are you on campus here? Okay. His question was, where does he start locally to get involved? If because his mother lives somewhere else and his father's in another area. Right now, wherever you lay your head, wherever you're living, that's where you want to get involved, because that's where you can make a difference. And plus, keep in mind, when it comes to local politics, even to hear you out or to be able to vote, you have to be in that jurisdiction. So the first thing they're going to want to know, well, where do you live, right? So if you're coming from, and this was part of the issue with Dr. King, all right, but Dr. King responded and had to come to Birmingham because they weren't doing anything about it. So the first thing, if you go to a council meeting, the first thing they do, if you come up to the mic, they'll say, do you want to speak on any of the agenda items, right? They're going to first ask you for your address. They say your name and your address. And I would say, my name is Manuel Donelson. I live in Linden, New Jersey or something like that. And that already starts, okay, now we want to hear you out. But you always start where you lay your head, in my opinion, all right? Because that's where you're going to make a difference, and that's where you want to see change. And it makes it three things. It makes it more convenient for you. It makes you more passionate, too, because it impacts you, all right? And the third thing is you're educated through the process. So I would say locally, if you are a union, you want to go on their city website, find the meetings. They post everything, all of them, and have to legally. They have to post the information. They have to send it out to you. And also the minutes are there, you know, the minutes from the last meeting. And a lot of towns even televise their meetings. So if you can't physically be there because of class or something, try to catch it on TV, record it, but just get involved and know what's going on. I'll give you an example for that real quick. I was at a meeting one time, and they were about to, it was a while ago, but it was because of Hurricane Sandy. And the city was about to make this huge purchase to make sure the next time it happens that City Hall was equipped and ready to go and other buildings around there. And so as they were talking, there was something I had noticed that they had sold it like this is going to cover, say, this whole area. But as I was reading it, it suggested that it could possibly cover the area. So they were selling this item to say, if we do this, we'll be good. We won't experience what we experienced before. That was not the case. And I remember sitting there, I was reluctantly like, I don't really want to go to the mic. I know it's televised. I'm not trying to be on TV either. And I just didn't want to disrupt the meeting. It was all quiet. They was ready to go. And I was sitting there like, oh, come on, don't you be the one, right? And finally I said, forget it. I got to know. And I went there, I asked the council person who presented it, what if we purchase this thing for like $100 and something thousand, is this going to absolutely solve our issue? And another councilwoman chimed in, yes. And I wasn't talking because I needed him to. And finally, he was thumbing around, but he finally had to say, we can't guarantee that. And you heard this gasp in the room, like, ooh, you know. And now people are looking at me like, thank you. In the meeting, it wasn't about thank you, but I remember I was reluctant to get involved. And how did I find out about the meeting? I went on the website. I went down there, you know. It's always a few people in the room, and the same with your school board, all right? You can get involved in the local school board. But just do your homework, do your research, and try to put it on your calendar. That's the best thing to do. And if you can't make every meeting, try every other meeting or try quarterly. But if not, try to at least get the minutes and be informed. Any other questions? All right, thank you guys very much. I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Conyers. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Donelson. Thank you so much. I hope everybody is, oh, you do have a question?
there's one app I use, and I'll share it with you guys. There's a show that's on Sirius XM, and it's called the Party of Lincoln app. What it does, I have it right here. What it does, it allows you to get all information from locally, and there's many apps like it, but if I want to call my local representative, if I want to check the voting guide, it gives me, if I want to register to vote, it allows me to research local politics, if you want to run for office, it tells you what to do. If you want to check facts, check voter ID laws, check the Constitution, and even become a poll worker. It just has everything here, and I use it frequently. It's called the Party of Lincoln app, and it was created by a lady named Karen Hunter. She has different politics. She's a professor and a Pulitzer Prize winning writer. And you may not agree with her politics if you hear, or you may agree, but what I like is the resources, all right? Because one thing is for certain, you know what? Even like I said, with the recent election we had, it's not what happened, because what happened has already happened. It's now what are you going to do about it? If there's something you don't agree with, and trust me, you agree with every, I didn't agree with everything President Obama did, right? There were certain decisions I did not like. But I agree with most of it, and those things I didn't like, I researched and I tried to do something about it, right? And it's going to be the same with this president, all right? There's a lot of things I don't like, right? But I'm not going to sit by on the sidelines and not have a voice. And that's what you saw last Saturday. Those were people out there for many reasons, but the most important thing is, where were you, all right? And where are you going to get involved? And it starts locally, like I said, the Party of Lincoln app. Now, back in the day, we couldn't do this, touch a screen and get the whole world at your fingertips. When I was growing up, and I'm only in my 40s, closer to 50 than 40, but I used to have to go to the library and go through the card catalog, and write down what was on there and go upstairs and look for this book. And it was a whole adventure. Now, at your, a double click and you got the whole world at your fingertips. One of the challenges we face, though, we're double clicking the wrong stuff, right? And then we're surprised that, you know what, I'm filled with all this other stuff and not filled with the stuff I need to make change in myself and in the world. So I challenge you and I challenge myself. When I'm online, I double click. Like I said, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's there. If you're really trying to make change in your world and in yourself, start researching and getting involved in things that can enrich your mind, because the United Negro College coined this term a long time ago. A mind is a terrible thing to waste, and now it's become part of our vernacular, if you will. But it really is a terrible thing to waste. I see your hand. Yes. Because if we don't pay attention now with this recent election, you have somebody who was a business person but didn't have experience in politics. It doesn't even matter. That's not my issue. My issue is that person works for us, period. All right? Now imagine if you came to work every day and there was no boss, right? Eventually, I don't care who you are, unless you're really committed, you're going to be hard-pressed to get moving at the right time. If I went to the office and the boss was never there, and every day and somebody told me, well, you kind of just self-supervised here. I'm like, okay, I need to start making this work for me then, right? I don't like getting up at 7 o'clock. So we'll be coming in about 9, right? I want to have a longer lunch. And matter of fact, I want to check out early, actually, right? Just imagine. So we have people in Congress, we have people in the White House, we have people in D.C. that we need to hold them accountable, all right? And we need to use our voice locally, nationally, and even in, here's another area. You have county politics. You have freeholders, right? Do you know who your freeholders are? Your assembly person, do you know who they are? And I'm telling you, it does make a difference. When I go to a meeting in my town, I know everybody there and they know me. And it's not a relationship of like a high five, it's a good one. Some of them come right away explaining something because I'm asking all the time. Matter of fact, I had a Bible study last night at my church. Before the Bible study, it was a ward meeting. It was scheduled the same time. So what I did, I went to the church early. I helped them set up. I told them I'll be back right at 7:30 when it starts. But I went to that meeting for the first 20 minutes because it was down the street. And I got there, and sure enough, there's my council person there. There's another council person there, and another council person. And they all greeted me by my name. And I'm asking them questions about some land that they're about to purchase and renovate. So I can't complain, you know. You ever see signs on your street, don't park there, right, at a certain time? And all you do is obey it and you get upset. And when you get a ticket, you're mad. Don't you know that was something that was introduced, discussed, and then passed? But if you don't go to the meeting, you won't know. You'll just see a tree pop up or a tree come down. Or you'll see, like I said, a sign that says don't park there. And you're like, why do I got to move my car every Tuesday at 7 o'clock? Those are the things I go ask at a meeting. Because sometimes I'll look and see, okay, I didn't see nothing come through here Tuesday at 7 and 11. So I need to understand why I can't park there. But when I get that ticket, that's what motivates me, right? Because I don't want to take $50, because to me a ticket is like just like this. Just drive down the street, take $50 and throw it out. That's exactly what a ticket is, right? But for the city, it's a tax. All right? Any other questions? Yes, sir. Yeah, I would say how do we do, like you said, you referenced the Tea Party and you referenced getting involved in motivation. It starts with, look at the Women's March, right? So they were able to use that platform for social media. They used it and they got the word out. So now the next step, and they had organizers at each place. Part of their next step, and should be part of ours, is you always have to have an agenda. Once you have a clear agenda, and you have to know the people that are involved. Who are the members of this group? Who's committed to the process? Because once again, a divided house can't stand. If you just bring a lot of people together and make a lot of noise, but they're not clear on the agenda, they're not clear on the goal, you have to be specific. All right. So say if people want to get involved with this current administration, they're going to have to organize. They're going to have a clear agenda. They're going to have a purpose, and then start working on their messaging, right? And then getting their message out. Because part of what the Tea Party did, they were just consistent, and they were active. But they were consistent about what they wanted to see happen, and they got involved, and they started doing it locally, all right? And locally, that's what I was saying. Locally that's where the strength is at, is not nationally. Because if you put pressure on your representative, right? Because you tell your representative, listen, this is what, because they have to do what their constituents want, or they're not going back in that seat. And you don't believe me, ask anybody ever heard of the NRA, right? The NRA is the National Rifle Association, Association, and they're very strong, very powerful, right? And they have a clear agenda. They're a united front, and they lobby and rally for their causes, right? And they're unapologetic. And you have people, elected officials, who are afraid, literally, to go against the NRA because they want to be reelected. So when those laws come up for different gun rights, some of them are silent, quiet. They're no show or no vote because they know that in their particular area of territory, they could lose that election. So locally get involved, but like I said, have a clear agenda. You got to know. When I go, if I go to a local meeting, or you go, when you come up to the mic, have your notes and know exactly what you want to talk about and do your research. Because you'll see people go to those meetings, and even on the local, county level, and they're just babbling on. And those people just tolerate them. You're making a whole bunch of noise. And they know the ones who make noise. They tolerate you until you leave. If you come, like I've done before, I've told my local politician, how you doing? I'm here with 4 registered voters. Because they know in my town, one guy won by 8 votes. So I know lots of people. I can come with 10 people and look him dead in his face and say, I'm here with these 10 registered voters, and remind him how he won with 8 votes, right? And let him know that I'm concerned about something. He's already listening. And I'm clear about what it is. And it's something that you have to be passionate about yourself. If you're not passionate about it, you're not going to be committed to it, right? And like I said, I gave an example. If climate change is something you're concerned about, but it's not your thing, and you got to struggle with it, then let those who do climate change, you support them, whether it's financially or you show up. But you want to make sure it's something that you are concerned about, you're passionate about, and that you really want to see change in, all right? But the agenda, it starts with a clear agenda, though. Any other questions? All righty. I'm turning it back over. Everybody, thank you very much. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Reverend Donelson. Oh, okay. Thank you, Reverend Donelson. And thank all of you for coming out. I hope to see you again during African History Month. We begin on the 14th. And once again, we're going to be, our program is going to be African people in the criminal justice system. And hopefully you guys will come out, and we're going to have former FBI agent Tyrone Powers here, DeLacy Davis of BCAP, Black Cops Against Police Brutality, and others. And I'm sure it'll be a lively forum. Thank you so much for coming out. See you soon. Yeah.